So we have, I don't even know. Let's see, this is like about 100 enemies here. We're gonna rank them based on how dangerous they are. But we are going to be averaging between the 3 games. So what does that mean? The Emperor Bullblax, for instance. He's in Pikmin 1 and Pikmin 2. The Emperor Bullblax in Pikmin 1 is one of the toughest enemies in the entire game. And in Pikmin 2, he's a big jokey jokester. So he's like S tier, but also like a D tier at the same time. So then what we're gonna do is we're gonna be like, okay, he's good in this, bad in this, average it out. He's gonna be just the middling enemy. Because it's impossible to be like, oh yeah, S tier Emperor Bullblax in Pikmin 1, and then D tier Emperor Bullblax in Pikmin 2. There's not enough character portraits, and that gets really, really complicated. We're gonna be sticking to 1 ranking per enemy. I guess we should probably get started, huh? So let's start with, let's actually name the tiers first. Hold on. Okay, so this S tier is danger. The avoid tier, okay. The meh, and then the easy tier. So let's grab, okay, this is the lesser spotted jelly float. Only found like in the shower room and then maybe one other spot. It hardly ever kills your Pikmin. Its HP is low enough that pretty much any type of Pikmin you have can kill it. Even if like it absorbs like half of them. If you have like 5 Pikmin, you can just kind of beat it down. No crazy regeneration, nothing like that, but it does have offensive prowess. It's not just like a sitting duck, like it will go after you. So I'm gonna put the jelly float in the meh tier because it is an enemy, it is threatening, and it can kill your Pikmin. But it's just not very likely to. And I think that's a very meh enemy, you know? Oh, the fly thing from Pikmin 3, it's easy. It just gives you nectar. It physically cannot harm your Pikmin in any way. It drops like 4 or 5 pellets of nectar. And yeah, I'm surprised it's even included as an enemy on here, but I'm pretty sure the honey wisps are as well, so. All right, the Ghoulix is an enemy that's only found in Pikmin 1. He is not in Pikmin 2 or Pikmin 3. But yeah, you can only fight it with blue Pikmin. If you don't know that, it's a problem, right? If you try to attack the Ghoulix with red Pikmin and yellow Pikmin in Pikmin 1, you're gonna get just exploded. All your Pikmin are gonna drown and die. Even with blue Pikmin, it can still like bounce them off. It doesn't have any ability to hurt blue Pikmin though. For the sole sake of being able to kill red and yellow Pikmin so easy, you need to figure out how to fight it first. It can absolutely just kind of, wipe your squad out if you don't know what you're doing. So I'm going to put the Ghoulix in okay. I feel like that's a pretty good spot to place it. Okay, is that the toady or the raging? That is the raging bloister. There are 2 scenarios in which you fight the raging bloister in a playthrough. But the raging bloister, basically, like, if you have 1 captain, the raging bloister is a nightmare. It's almost impossible to defeat. But if you know how to cheese the raging bloister with 2 captains, then it's actually not bad at all. Depending on where it is, you can still kind of get caught. The tentacle attack definitely has like a lot of range and kind of covers like a really, like way like larger than you think. Like if the Pikmin are on like the sides of the enemy, sometimes the little tentacle spiky attack can absolutely just like grab it. I think it's kind of the same thing as the Ghoulix. Like if you have game knowledge, then you should absolutely be fine. You should just kind of be able to switch back and forth between Olimar and Louis or Olimar and the President and be able to just kill it with no problem. But besides that, if you don't have the game knowledge and you don't know to like switch captains to kind of throw it off, then the Raging Bloister can absolutely kind of wreck your squad. I'm almost tempted to put him in the avoid tier just because in that scenario where you only have 1 captain, he is insanely dangerous, but I think I'm gonna leave him in okay. All right, the fly beetle. I don't know what the hell his name is. Yeah, it's the Burrownit, but it flies. I've never had any trouble with this enemy. I think that it actually makes a lot of sense for it to have the shell on the front as compared to the cloaking Burrownit. Again, it's kind of the scenario like it can only kill maybe 1. I probably can get like 2 or 3 of them at a time. If it can only get 1, that's one thing. But I've never actually seen it kill a Pikmin, I don't think. I think that this is also kind of a meh enemy. You should just be able to deal with it because you get the jump on it too. Like it's not actively searching you out. It has to unburrow from the ground and all that sort of nonsense. So That's a meh. Oh my god, I cannot believe I just... Is that the regular Bullbear? Yeah, that's the regular Bullbear. Okay, yep. I feel like if you've ever played Pikmin, you know that the regular Bullbear is absurd. Not only in Pikmin 1, it's got a butt ton of health. If you aren't throwing all of your Pikmin at it or rushing it from behind, you might get bodied. Even with like 100 blue Pikmin, like it depends on the cycle. Like he might shake them off and then be able to eat like 20 or 30 of them. This is only in Pikmin 1 also. There's so many of them in Pikmin 1. You know, maybe there's like 6 of them in the Distant Spring, maybe like 4 or 5, but still. The Bullbear being able to just kind of wander around and being able to drag his little minions with him. And then on top of that, once you kill it, it can regenerate health. I don't know whose idea that was, but this thing is absolutely insane. In any dungeon, it can just surprise you. It can sneak up on you. Honestly, bringing the babies with it is equally as hard because you could focus all your efforts on that. But then the babies are just like kind of picking at his feet, you know, killing your Pikmin as you're trying to kill him. So obviously in Pikmin 2, you can just kind of burp spray him, but that's the case for like every enemy. The burp spray is absolutely overpowered. So I'm not even going to kind of rank them with the burp spray in mind. But yeah, no, definitely a dangerous enemy. Definitely one of the most dangerous in the entire game, for sure. Okay, see, here we are. The Emperor Bullblax. Now, Pikmin 1, obviously absurd. Obviously, it takes like half the day to deal with him. You might not even be ready for him. Like, you could have the entire day to prep. You can have like 70 bomb rocks with yellow Pikmin, and you still might not be able to kill him during the day. Obviously, Pikmin 2, the Emperor Bullblax, you just kind of yoss purple Pikmin at him, maybe like 10 of them, and then you're good. But I think that overall, I've had plenty of trouble with the Emperor Bullblax in Pikmin 1. It's definitely one of those enemies where if you're not careful, he can just kind of gobble up your Pikmin. When he starts jumping and smushing too, that's a whole nother thing. And then depending on like what cycle you get him with the bomb rocks, he can snap out sooner than you expected from his like daze, and then he can just kind of destroy your team. So averaging it out from Pikmin 2 and Pikmin 1, I'm going to put the Emperor Bullblax in the avoid tier. I still think he's more dangerous than the Ghoulix and the Raging Bloister, but Pikmin 2 definitely drags my mans down. Oh, the little tiny Phosbat. I don't know. I want to put it in easy, but at the same time, if there's so many of them, like especially in Pikmin 3, right? Like when you go to the Behemoth Phosbat's arena, and there's so many of these little guys, right? And they're all kind of chomping at the bit. You know, they take a while to recognize that you have Pikmin and to eat them. But honestly, if there's like 6 or 7 of them, I don't know. I think they might be at the very bottom of meh tier. I don't know. I've definitely had a couple Pikmin like nipped from behind by these things. I didn't even know they could kill Pikmin until like my 3rd playthrough of it. But they can absolutely. So I'm gonna, right for now, I'm gonna stick the Phosbat in the meh tier. We'll kind of go back and see how it shakes out depending on other enemy placements on the list here. Raging Longlegs. Okay, this enemy is not that bad. It's really not. In fact, I think it's less dangerous than every other Longleg variant. I think it's less dangerous than Beety in Pikmin 1, Pikmin 2. I think it's less dangerous than the hairy Longlegs for sure. Just because it's so big. And if you just like stay under his like big bulbous center and just bring like 5 or 10 Pikmin and just keep chucking them and whistling him, he's not usually that big a deal. It's when he kind of spawns in on you randomly that you're like, okay, well now I have to deal with this thing. Overall, I think I'm just gonna put it in the okay tier. I think I'm gonna put it in the okay tier because again, it's like if you do things this particular way, you can absolutely just kind of cheese him and not have to worry about anything. I don't know, he's either at the top of okay or at the bottom of avoid, but again, we'll kind of figure out how these tiers work with each other. The iridescent flint beetle. Annoying, but obviously it can't kill your Pikmin. It can distract your Pikmin, which is annoying, and then that could lead to them getting killed. But for the most part, iridescent flint beetle, definitely obnoxious. Doesn't give you pretty much any rewards, is just kind of there to get in your way and to make you feel sad about not being able to control your Pikmin. That is a scornet. This is an individual scornet. Now, I've never really had trouble with the individual scornets. I know that in the boss fight, oh my god, What's that thing's name? It's literally, I'm blanking, guys. I'm blanking. Scornet Maestro. There it is. In the Scornet Maestro boss fight, obviously these things are the main method of attack. So I think that being said, I think that this actually, it's definitely higher than the Phosphats. Honestly, I think they're more, let's do a little reorganize there, because they definitely aren't an issue, but because 100 of them come at you, they definitely kind of add up to be an issue. They are a little neat enemy, but they definitely don't pose much of a threat like on their own. So, all right, big guy. I almost want to put him in meh as well. The Bullborbs themselves, all of them they're not that big of a deal. The Snow Bullborbs specifically, as compared to like the Red Bullborbs, are equally as easy. I honestly don't even know if they have more health. I think they have like less health, and they just look like hairy. Like there's nothing special about them that makes them more difficult than the Red Bullborb is. You can't even say that they're tough in Pikmin 1 or tough in Pikmin 3 because they're only in Pikmin 2. I think it's probably just at the bottom of okay. And the only reason I'm not putting it in meh is because the enemies in meh either 1, take a lot of time to kill your Pikmin, or 2, can only kill Pikmin 1 at a time. I think that's the only reason it goes in the okay tier. Oh! All right. The Water Wraith, I don't know. I don't know how to rank him. I think I have to put him in danger. I want to put him in a void, but I think that his capacity to either corner you or just kill your Pikmin is kind of crazy. The Water Wraith is ridiculous. There's a reason that it's so infamous, right? And I feel like it would be disrespectful to not put him in danger. Definitely not as dangerous as the Bullbear. Still one of the most iconic Pikmin enemies. Probably the most iconic Pikmin 2 enemy for sure. The whole dungeon based around the idea of having to flee from him. I think that warrants a danger tier. All right, speaking of the Scornet Maestro, I think I have to put the Maestro right next to the regular Scornet because, I mean, he doesn't do anything, right? Besides control the Scornets, because he doesn't do anything himself. He needs the Scornets to do his dirty work, and the Scornets are meh, so he's meh. Great boss. I really like the idea that he controls his own little army of things, like his own army of 100 tiny creatures, with music, nonetheless, like how we have the whistle, he's got the harp thing, but definitely a meh enemy. Of the Pikmin 3 bosses, he's either the easiest or the second easiest. All right, the Honeywisp. I feel like I don't even need to explain that. It's like the dragonfly. It can maybe drop matites sometimes, but then if it drops matites, they only appear in the overworld, so there's no point of that. If anything, it gives you more nectar and some Pikmin, so Honeywisp, obviously not a threat. Okay. Quaggle Meerklops. I think this thing's kind of crazy. I think this thing kind of goes crazy. It's like funny because the first time I fought him, I didn't even think much of him. But then on future subsequent playthroughs of Pikmin 3, for whatever reason, I've consistently had a tough time dealing with him. I don't know if it's because I just go in kind of unprepared, or if it's because like, you're just kind of at that stage in the game, but being able to utilize Rock Pikmin, Blue Pikmin, and Wing Pikmin during the fight while trying to like focus on his big plant thing. I just think that I've had plenty of experiences with this thing where it like loops its tongue and then you're boned, or it steps on like a captain and then you lose control of your army, and then the army just kind of wanders around the mud, and then all of a sudden you're in a bad situation. So I think the Meerklops actually is very dangerous, especially if you're not prepared to fight him. I mean, yeah, female shear grub, they physically cannot do anything to you. They just kind of mix you up with the, male shear grubs and just kind of get you confused. On their own, they obviously can't harm your Pikmin. They literally can't kill Pikmin, so I can't put them any higher than easy. The Puff Stool. Okay. All right, so obviously if you swarm the Puff Stool, then it's kind of not a big deal. You can kill it in one cycle with a bunch of red Pikmin. But if you don't know that necessarily, I don't know, turning your Pikmin into Puffmin definitely can be an issue. I think it just being a confusing enemy for some, I think that warrants an okay. I don't think he's anything spectacular, and obviously you can cheese him. Not as tough as the Raging Longlegs, but let's say, like, because if your Pikmin get puff-minified, I'm pretty sure they just die no matter what. I think they just are puff-min until they die. So that alone makes them able to kill, like, a decent chunk of your Pikmin. Gold flint beetle. Slightly above the iridescent flint beetle. Actually, you know what? Okay, honey wisps down there. Yeah, these two down there, because these guys can distract you. And usually the gold one is on a sub-level, because it contains like a treasure, or it contains red sprays. So honestly, it helps you more than it hurts you. I think that the gold one obviously is not a big deal. All right, ooh, okay. Shear grubs. I almost want to say these things. Okay, all right. I don't know if this is controversial, right? I want to put them at the top of meh. But I also kind of want to put them at the bottom of okay. I feel like they're more dangerous than the snow bulborb. What seems more correct? I feel like they're more okay because usually there's a lot of them. In Pikmin 1, if you're swarming them, they can automatically kill one of your Pikmin. So if you have 30 Pikmin, right? You're bringing 30 Pikmin to carry a treasure. You find a bunch of shear grubs and one of them latches on. That Pikmin is dead. It's a guaranteed kill. And I think that that alone kind of makes them ridiculous. And they can regenerate health as they go underground as well. So I think that that's actually a really good placement for them. Oh my goodness. Okay, the puffy blowhog. Obviously cannot kill your Pikmin directly, right? But I can't put them in easy because they're, one, annoying, and then two, they can put your Pikmin in really not so good spots. I mean, they also like deflower Pikmin, so they permanently nerf you in like a cave. And then also like there's not really any in Pikmin 3. Like obviously they exist, but they don't exist near really any enemies, so it's not a big deal. I think I am gonna put them just at the bottom of meh, because even though they can't directly kill your Pikmin, I think that the danger they create with deflowering them and moving them, I think is enough to get your Pikmin killed. Maybe not immediately, but sometimes even down the line. Ooh, all right. I think this is the first enemy that can kill Pikmin that I feel like I need to plop in easy. The pond skater, the skitter skate, I don't know what they're called. They shoot water at your Pikmin occasionally. Usually they're not a huge deal. Sometimes they'll get you, but then you just whistle your Pikmin back and you're totally fine. And then they also get one shot by blue Pikmin if you throw them at them. So again, it's kind of like a way worse watery blowhog, if that makes any sense. It's like a single shot watery blowhog. Sometimes it's tough to like pin them down and like actually kill them. But overall, I don't think that thing's anything special. Ravernous, whisker pillars, get on down to easy. Yeah, obviously they can't do anything. They're there just to pop your berries. I don't need to explain any more than that. Sometimes they're annoying, but they are completely harmless. I believe that is, I don't know if that's a caustic Dweevil. Is caustic the blue one? I don't know. I always get the poison and the water one mixed up. Munge, yeah, Munge. The caustic is the water one. Okay, thank you. Is, in my opinion, I think it's the lowest of the Dweevils. Obviously, if you attack it, it can move freaking, enemy pieces. It can move treasures. The big thing with Munge Dweevils is that when you attack it, it exudes poison. The poison will never affect your captain. So even if your Pikmin get hit, you can still whistle them back without literally any problems. You can always just punch the Munge Dweevil to death with your captain, and then you don't even have to engage it. Because usually you're not using white Pikmin for combat anyway. Okay. All right, this is the definition of a void. The volatile Dweevil. Obviously, super, super deadly. If you get cornered, you can't be helped. The explosion will go off. It might wipe out 80 of your Pikmin. It'll damage the captains. Now, the only good thing about the volatile Dweevil is that it kills itself. So it'll only ever explode one time. You can always activate it and run far enough away that it becomes not a big deal. Obviously, it's the definition of a void. Like, do not get this thing anywhere near you. Scout with your captains. Play smart. Otherwise, you're going to be in for a world of hurt. But I think that it's not necessarily dangerous because, one, it doesn't have a ton of health. Two, it can only do like one thing and it kills itself. And then three, like as long as you're scouting, you can actively, avoid deaths that way. Okay, peckish aristocrab. I think it really depends, because if you have rock Pikmin, it's not that big of a deal, but I'm pretty sure the peckish aristocrab is an avoid enemy. Because if you just have blues or you have reds, these things can kind of be an issue. The bubbles aren't a big deal, but they can scoop and eat Pikmin really fast, like surprisingly fast. And then on top of that, their movement pattern it's a little strange. Every time I feel like if I'm not prepared for the aristocrab, he kind of gets the better of me. He might get like 3 or 4 of my Pikmin. And especially if you don't have rock Pikmin to break his claw, I think that he's actually pretty good. I think his AI is really good for like an enemy. Fiery bullblax. For the sole sake of one, it has more health than the Emperor bullblax in Pikmin 2, which doesn't make any goddamn sense at all. You can fight them with purples. I'm not gonna say you can't fight them with purples. You can, it's just very meticulous and really annoying. And if you run low on red Pikmin, you're gonna have a tough time anyway. Let's say you have 10 red Pikmin in a given sublevel and no bitter sprays. The fiery bullblax can absolutely be a force to be reckoned with. That much HP is really problematic. And then on top of that, it feels like the distance it can travel is higher than most other Bulborbs that sleep during the day. I'm not sure exactly if that's true, but just the sole purpose of the HP and being on fire, a Pikmin-specific enemy, and then also having the properties of a Bulborb, I'm pretty sure warrants it being in just the avoid tier. Like, you really don't want to have to fight a fiery Bullblax unless you have to, unless it has a treasure, etc. Or if you don't have any red Pikmin, you're just kind of screwed. So, giant breadbug. I don't think I've ever had a Pikmin die to a giant breadbug. I'm gonna put it in easy. Obviously, it can compete for items with Pikmin, so it can kind of drag stuff into its lair, and then that way it kills the Pikmin, but I don't think I've ever seen that happen. Just throw a bunch of purples, stay away from the electricity, you'll be fine. I don't think that that's any sort of controversial. I think this thing is like not a big deal, even a little bit. This is a small red Bulborb. All right, it is, and it's so funny because there's so many like lower tier enemies, right? It's more dangerous than the jelly float, but not as dangerous as this thing, not as dangerous as the Munge Dweevil, nor the Scornet Maestro. I just think that like if there's 3 or 4 of them, like you might just like miss one, and especially if there's like hundreds, like a couple sub-levels, they can just kind of pick off your Pikmin if you're not careful. In Pikmin 1 as well, they can call the like mom Bulborb. That can happen, and that's really, really obnoxious because not having that red Bulborb asleep when you attack it, especially in Pikmin 1, is kind of a big deal. Because like attacking it from the front just like does not work. Like it doesn't have the same eyeballs or a weak spot mechanic as in Pikmin 3. So, that alone also kind of makes the red Bulborbs or the dwarf Bulborbs dangerous. He's definitely in the meh tier. He can kill your Pikmin. You can only kill like one of them at a time though. But there's a couple things that can make them a little dicey occasionally. Ooh, wow, this is I'm gonna put it in a void. Obviously, for those of you who don't know, the decorated cannon beetle spits out boulders. And not only do these boulders have the ability to crush and squash your Pikmin and damage your captain, it also is heat-seeking. So it's like magnetically attracted to like your spacesuit. It's magnetically attracted to your captain. So you can obviously like use the boulders to kill other enemies or even kill this armored cannon beetle itself. But like one wrong step, one wrong move, one wrong maneuver your Pikmin, this thing's really dangerous. I'm almost tempted to put it in the danger tier just for the sole concept of how like it can ruin your life. And in fact, I think I'm going to. Because yes, there's ways to cheese them, but there's also ways to cheese like the water wraith. I think it's at the very low end of danger tier. Because I don't feel right putting it just in the avoid tier, because the things in the avoid tier can really only kill a couple of your Pikmin at once, except for the volatile Dweevil. Boulder spewing guy can be insane. Oh, regular ass toady bloister. This is an enemy that I don't think I really appreciated until Pikmin 2 Kaizo. When certain floors were just absolutely filled with these guys, they kind of have a very large like radius. Like they don't move fast, but they will like come up to you very slowly, kind of sneak up. And then because they don't make any noise, right? He's more like an obstacle than he is an enemy, but he does kill your Pikmin. Obviously in Pikmin 3, they made him easier because you can attack his like body as well. In Pikmin 2, you can only attack the little sprout, but in Pikmin 3, you can attack the body. So averaging the 2 toady bloisters out definitely lands him in the meh tier, but I think it's meh just above the flying burrownit or whatever the hell it's called. All right, dwarf snow bullborbs, same thing, but to a lesser extent than the red bullborbs. Obviously, they didn't exist in Pikmin 1, nor do they exist in Pikmin 3, so they don't have the like call mechanic that they can call their like, you know, parent or whatever, like the snow bullborbs. You know, there are multiple of them in certain areas, but it's like one of the first enemies you fight in the entire like game in Pikmin 2, and they're meant to be like training wheels, right? So I don't think they're that dangerous. They are more dangerous than the jelly float and everything below it, but I can't consider them any type of really dangerous. Oh, speaking of jelly float, that's the greater spotted jelly float. Now the greater spotted jelly float, I think is substantially more difficult than the regular spotted jelly float for the sole factor of it also can suck up your captains. I don't think the yellow one can do it, or the lesser spotted one can do it. I'm pretty sure the greater can, and that kind of leaves you in a point where you're in with your Pikmin, and it gives the jelly float more time to like digest your Pikmin in its like body or whatever you want to call it. And then it also has obviously more HP than the yellow one. That all being said, I think I'm actually just going to put them at the bottom end of okay. I don't think it's right to disrespect them by putting them in meh, because especially depending on what kind of squad you have, if you have a squad of like all blues or yellows or something like that, and you can't dish out really good damage, they can kill your Pikmin. But they can definitely kill more than one at a time, unlike most of these guys, bar the bloister. Ooh. Regular? Okay, there's 2 of them on here. I don't know why there are 2 of them on here. Oh, wait. One of them is just the snow one. So this is the one that spits snow, and this is the one that spits rocks. Now the one that spits snow, it's annoying. It's the same as like the blowhog, I think. Like it can prevent you from completing an obstacle, maybe. But also like it can't actively kill your Pikmin. Like the snow can't crush the Pikmin, it just kind of wraps them up with it and then goes down the hill and explodes, and then your Pikmin are just like there. So it's more of an annoyance than anything. However, these green ones can absolutely be a problem. Mostly because the boulders just roll infinitely, and you could think you're like safe, right? These things, like they mean business sometimes, and especially in 2 and 3. In 2, they can either come up from the ground or they can be walking around. In 3, I believe they just only come up from the ground, but when they do, they can indeed be an issue. Anything that kind of insta-kills your Pikmin that's like a projectile, I automatically think is pretty damn good. Let's actually do a little order of this avoid tier. I think the crab goes up there. And then the fiery bullblax definitely goes over the volatile, I think. Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I think having these guys right next to each other but differentiated by tier is pretty fair. They're definitely dangerous. Definitely don't want to mess with them all too frequently, but they can indeed sometimes be easy. I think you just have to have really good Pikmin management, because otherwise they're just going to be a problem for you. All right, Matites obviously are easy, but having the ability to scare Pikmin and kind of put them in bad situations. There's like one sublevel in particular I'm thinking of the Matites with the Emperor Bullblaxes. I think that they have to go at the bottom of meh, because they can get your Pikmin killed. Almost easier than the Puffy Blowhog or the Snow Beetle. Regular old male Shear grubs. I gotta give it to them. They're in the same boat as the Shear Wigs. If they latch onto a Pikmin, they are gonna kill it. And then on top of that, usually like newer players will just swarm their Pikmin around these things. If they're combined with like the female ones, you know, they can definitely make off with like a kill or two. So I think that they're actually just okay, right? Like they don't have an insane amount of danger to them. Like, they're not going to be killing multiple Pikmin at once, but there are multiple of them usually. And if you don't deal with them like systematically or carefully, they can absolutely pick off a Pikmin or two. And I think that that puts them underneath the Shearwigs, because the Shearwigs can fly and they can regenerate health as they fly. But the male Shear grub is definitely a consistent issue. Okay, this is the Dwarf Bullbear. Substantially better than these two. Better than the red, or the Dwarf Bulborb and the Dwarf Snow Bulborb. I'm just trying to think, like, are they really in the avoid tier? I think they are. I think that they're at the very bottom of avoid. Now, let me make my case for it. They follow regular Bullbears. So they're like little support class enemies, you know, that kind of pick off the scraps that the big Bullbear leaves behind. Sometimes they will be the reason that you lose Pikmin, and not actually the Bullbear itself, because even if you stun the Bullbear with like purple Pikmin, these guys can just kind of pick them off. They can just sit at the feet and just kind of like, you know, nom on your Pikmin however they want. On top of that, they have a larger distance, like viewing distance, than most of the other small Bullborb variants. And then they can also, I believe, like travel further. You know, so they're willing to follow you for more time than like a Dwarf Red Bullborb or a Dwarf Snow Bulborb. I think that most of the reason I'm putting them in the avoid tier is because there's usually like a multitude of them, and then also their danger is compounded because they usually ride with a Bullbear as like the main enemy of the force. So I think it's actually kind of fair to put them in just avoid. Aha! This thing. This actually... It's equally as difficult. They're really not anything crazy. It is just the reverse of the cloaking burrownit. It can kill a Pikmin occasionally, but usually you're never gonna have that issue because you could just swarm them with your Pikmin like right when they come out of the ground. And they're also right below these guys because they can't fly. So you can constantly just hammer away at them, you know? And especially with rock Pikmin, they're really not that big of a deal. I don't even think they can kill rock Pikmin. I don't think either of these can kill rock Pikmin because they'd have the puncture attack and they can't puncture the rocks, so. Hairy Longlegs. You can't really see them in there. So there's a few things about the hairy Longlegs that make me feel like it's more dangerous than it should be. For the most part, it's invulnerable. Before you start really picking at its hairs, before it becomes like bald, you have to kind of destroy all 8 of its little like joint hair pieces. And even then, in the tropical wilds, this thing goes from like arena to arena, so it's always like constantly moving, and that in itself can be really obnoxious. But then like its feet are way bigger than you expect. Like the raging Longlegs kills less Pikmin than the hairy Longlegs, and that is just so bizarre to me. Despite knowing how to fight them, I still find myself occasionally losing Pikmin to this thing, even with like perfect prep and just kind of knowing how to get past it. I think that it's that kind of dangerous of an enemy, and there's only 2 of them in the main game, but I do think that its AI is substantially better than like the beady or the raging. Okay, Pearly Clamp. I think I can give these things, I think I can give them an okay. I'm gonna give them at the bottom of okay. The only reason, because even though they're very predictable, sometimes they can just snap. You know, they can just snap, and then whatever Pikmin you have working on whatever's inside of it, usually they're blue Pikmin, they immediately just get got, right? Normally you can throw your Pikmin and time them and whatever, but sometimes your Pikmin won't be able to get out of the mouth in time, and it'll just snap shut. If you ever have just like a lapse in judgment, or you stop paying attention for like a split second while he's like opening his mouth, you can have your Pikmin get lost. I've certainly lost like 20 to 30 Pikmin at any given moment from the Clamp is dangerous. You know, it's not incredibly dangerous, and it actually like, it might be more like a meh enemy. But just the quantity of Pikmin it can kill at a time, especially if you're not careful, is enough for me to put it at the bottom of okay. Water Dumples. All right, Water Dumples they're more dangerous than regular Dwarf Bulborbs because you find them in the water. Their AI is better. They can eat more than 1 Pikmin at a time, and usually they eat Pikmin pretty fast. across all 3 games, you know, water dumbles don't have a ton of health. They have the most health in Pikmin 1, obviously, because Pikmin 1's the most difficult of the 3, I think. Because they can't guarantee a kill on Pikmin, I think they're just in the okay tier. They're not above the 2 shear grub, or the shear wig and the shear grub. Definitely when there's multiple of them, and if you're not paying attention, they can just kind of like sneak up on you and grab like 3 or 4 of your Pikmin. I think that ability to kill more than one at a time definitely lends itself to being an okay enemy. And that's the main difference between what I find to be a dangerous enemy and a not so dangerous enemy. Behemoth Fossbat. I think it's okay. I think it's okay. Maybe it's just in the avoid tier. I don't know. You literally just have to avoid it. I mean, that's exactly the name of the game, right? Like, you can't damage it until you get all of the lights up in the arena. If you're not paying attention or not careful enough, it can appear out of nowhere. It can suck up your Pikmin. It can get like, 5 to 10 of them at a time. So I think that makes him kind of dangerous. This is the first time you interact with an environment to beat an enemy in the Pikmin franchise. I'm pretty sure. I am pretty sure. I don't think any other enemy has that sort of interactivity. But for that reason alone, I think that it is in the avoid, because you literally are just trying to avoid it. As you're going about your business and trying to take it down, it's just always kind of lurking. It is definitely scary. And if you're not paying attention, it can catch you off guard. Medusal Slurker. This thing does not kill your Pikmin. It's obnoxious, but it doesn't kill your Pikmin. I think it's impossible for it to kill your Pikmin, because there's Pikmin that spawn in it in like challenge mode and stuff. It exists to be annoying. It's like a jelly float that gave up. Oh my god. I've been randomly grabbing these things. For those of you that did watch my Pikmin 2 Kaizo series, you know how much I absolutely could not stand the fact that there was a pileated snagret on like every single floor. I've had to kill more of these things than I ever wanted to in my entire life. Do I think they're dangerous, or do I think you just need to avoid them? No, they're dangerous. No, they're dangerous. They're dangerous. Not in the upper echelons of dangerous. Just trying to get a cycle on them where you can kill them is super obnoxious. They pop out of the ground more often than not. They chase you down. They can get like 3 Pikmin at a time. And sometimes the arena that they're in like can be really obnoxious too. Like in the sand pit arena, they're horrendous. Like, it's super annoying because you have to try to run your Pikmin out. It can just get the stragglers. Pileated Snagret, especially like in Kaizo, just appearing randomly, definitely always an issue. I think that that's enough to just warrant it a spot in the danger tier. I think that I just hate those things, dude. Breadbugs. Same thing as the big breadbug. It's just there's more of them. Because at least the regular breadbug exists in like the forest navel and can maybe drag your Pikmin through like the fiery blowhogs. But otherwise, like, yeah, no, they're not that dangerous. I don't think there's any world in which you lose like Pikmin to this thing, unless you're like really careless with what your Pikmin are doing. Like if you have like 2 out of 3 Pikmin on like a pellet or like an enemy or something like that, and you just left it alone, then the breadbug can take advantage and get the pellet and get your Pikmin. But I feel like that just doesn't happen. And even in situations where it can happen, it kind of doesn't. So I think that the breadbug definitely is just an easy enemy, despite being kind of hard to hit. That's the fiery and the watery blowhog, respectively. The fiery blowhog is easier than the watery blowhog. I think that they're probably just here. I think that they're in okay, and we're gonna say, just for the sake, that the watery blowhog is harder than the fiery blowhog because you can get fire immunity. You can never get like a water immunity. Like you'll still always get hit by it, and then on top of that, having to combat them with like blue Pikmin as compared to red Pikmin that do more damage instantly makes it so that watery blowhogs are tougher to take down. Overall though, still usually not a big deal. Like being able to just whistle your Pikmin and stop them from being like on fire or on water is you know, that's usually enough to kind of deal with these enemies. They don't have a ton of health either, and the fiery blowhog obviously existed in... fiery blowhog, actually, in Pikmin 1, like, they kill your Pikmin way faster. And they do a lot of damage to Olimar, too. The Pikmin cannot be on fire for very long in Pikmin 1. That just does not happen, right? Like, they're on fire for like a second, and if you don't whistle them in that time, they will die. All right, so here we are. All right, the Empress Bullblax, obviously only in Pikmin 2. You fight it, I want to say 3 times. How do I even rank this thing? Because there's a version of it that spits out the babies. Because this thing with the babies. But every time I encountered one of these things in Kaizo, it was spitting out babies. And that made it the most dangerous enemy in the room by far. Because if you can't get to it, it's constantly producing babies. And the babies, they're like the equivalent of the shear grubs in Pikmin 1. Like, they will take a Pikmin with them as they die. Like, they instantly devour Pikmin, which I think is just so crazy. The babies, for whatever reason, are ridiculously overpowered. If we include the baby-making ability of the Empress Bullblax, I think that they're some of the toughest enemy. And then on top of that, like, it makes rocks fall when it rolls. Like, sure, it can kill its own babies when it does that, but getting yourself in a position where there's no babies and you're able to finally take down the Emperor Bullblax, or Empress Bullblax, is kind of tough. I think that this thing and its followers are more dangerous than the Bullbear and its followers, the Water Wraith, the Meerklops. Yeah, I honestly, I think that that's a really okay spot for it, assuming that you include the babies. Which, you know what, we'll just rank the babies right now as we're on the topic. Babies, busted. Babies, absolutely busted. Because there's not just one of them. There's never just one of them. Obviously, you can go through with your captain and punch them all to death and whatever, but that doesn't stop the Bullblax from laying them, right? Like, they'll just keep coming out. They'll keep coming after you. And if you're not careful, like, they'll find your other captain who's with the Pikmin, and they'll just start devouring. And they can get, like, a lot back to back to back, and especially if there's more than one of them. I'm going to kind of group these two just together, because the Bullblax, the babies can't be without the Bullblax. And even though the Bullblax can be without the babies, in that sense, like, just in the initial whole of beasts, Bullblax isn't a big deal, but besides that, it's ridiculous. It definitely is, just because of the baby creation, for sure. I believe that is a Sputtlefish. And the Sputtlefish, yeah, it can be meh. It can eat some blue Pikmin if you're not careful, and then it spits out the ink, you know? I think that I've hardly ever lost Pikmin to the Sputtlefish. I've lost more Pikmin to, where are they? The Minnows. These Minnows, they can sometimes just, like, take a couple. I'm going to put these Minnows, actually, in, I'm going to put the Minnows up with the water dumples here. Because, although not insanely dangerous, if there's, like, 8 of them, you know, you might miss one, and then it just kind of happens to get a Pikmin, and especially in certain parts of the game, you have wing Pikmin, and these Minnows just, like, jump out of the water and catch them and drag them down. It's like, oh my god, like, I didn't even know they could do that, and they'll kind of put a wrench in your plans. So I think for that reason, the Minnows are definitely going to be in the okay tier, even though they can only eat one Pikmin at a time. I think they work best when they're in packs, though, and that's when they're really at their, like, most dangerous, even if it's not that dangerous. All right, get on up there, Gatling Groink. Get on up there. Get on. Okay, all right. Keep going. Yep. That comes as no surprise to anybody. The Gatling Groink is for sure an insanely dangerous enemy. Having a projectile attack that kills Pikmin, that deflowers them, being able to walk all over the map, being able to regenerate health, being able to revive itself once it has been actually killed. Bro, I don't need to talk about the Gatling Groinks anymore because they're ridiculous. In Pikmin 2 Kaizo, the best way around them was just to abuse their pathfinding so that they would walk off the edge. Like, that's how much I didn't want to actually fight them. Okay, regular old burrowing Snagret. Now, remember guys, when we encounter an enemy that is pretty much in all 3 games, we have to kind of average out, you know, those rankings, right? So in Pikmin 1, they can be kind of brutal. They can be. Because they have way more health. There's like 3 of them. in that one area, and they definitely are more dangerous, right? Pikmin 2, not dangerous pretty much at all. They're like basically a minor enemy. Like, yeah, they're a boss, but they're more like a mini boss than anything. And then Pikmin 3, there's only one of them, and I think they're the easiest in Pikmin 3. Just because they can stick their beak in the ground, I don't think that they're anything crazy. That all being said, I think I'm just going to rank them in the okay tier. I think I am going to put them above the watery blowhogs. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put them above the puffstool too. Not as dangerous. Like, I'd definitely be more scared of a raging longlegs than a pileated or a regular snagret. But I'm pretty sure the snagret it's good enough in Pikmin 1 that it can kind of make up for the slack in Pikmin 2 and 3. And in Pikmin 2, it can spawn in like the wall, and it can just kind of get your Pikmin from there, and then you can't do anything about it. So, and if there's multiple of them as well, they definitely lend to like make a room tougher. And their surprise factor can also be kind of an issue. Skitterleafs. Skitterleafs. All right. So, yeah, underneath the Slurker, they're easy. They don't kill your Pikmin. They're just a leaf. You know, you just sometimes kill them, even if you don't want to kill them. They don't harm you. They just run around. There's no reason to kill them. They shake your Pikmin off. Your Pikmin get distracted, right? But that's about it. Whip-tongue Bulborb. Okay, this is an avoid, because even though it's easy, if you get it in like the cycle and you can keep just hitting its eyes as it doesn't do anything, you know, you're fine. You can do that with pretty much every single Bulborb enemy in Pikmin 3. If, for whatever reason, you can't do that, this thing will just kind of slurp up your Pikmin from the ground, you know? And I use rock Pikmin for the most part. This thing will just kind of slurp them up from the ground if they bounce off. Like, it really doesn't care. And it also, like, it does have the Whip Tongue attack, which I think is kind of ridiculous. And for that reason, I am going to put it over the Dwarf Bullbear, because the Dwarf Bullbear isn't as like individually dangerous, but the Whip Tongue can get dicey. This is the Crawmad. No. That's a Hermit Crawmad. This is the Bug-Eyed Crawmad, excuse me. Bug-Eyed Crawmad. All right, this thing is, I don't even know if it's like difficult necessarily. It's definitely okay. It does have the ability to kill your Pikmin. It hardly ever gets the opportunity to like actually attack your Pikmin and do damage to them and like eat them, because you just attack its eyes and it like gets shocked, and you attack its other eye and you beat it up. Like, there's definitely a strategy for this thing, and it can take you off guard, but like even then, I've never seen this thing actually be able to eat Pikmin. I'm gonna put it with the Snow Bulborb. If you're playing correctly, then you should just be able to beat it no problem. Plasm Wraith. This thing sucks. This is the final boss of Pikmin 3. It's at least in the top 2. Let me just think about it for a second, because if you're using rocks, it kills so many Pikmin. Like, you can beat it without losing Pikmin, but it kills so many Pikmin that I feel like it's definitely more dangerous than the Miraclops. Damn, I think that this thing actually is like kind of busted, especially considering it wants you to use like every single type of Pikmin, but doing that is like an absolute mess. No. It's definitely more dangerous than the Gatling Groink, because there's like a whole bunch of shit going on in its arena at one time. If there's like, you know, a fire platform with a water bubble with a cube rolling around, and then this thing is also eating Pikmin, it's ridiculous, dude. Definitely serves as a good final boss, but I feel like there's no world in which you're able to use every single color effectively on it, you know, or every single type of Pikmin, I should say. All right, the Fiery Dweevil, whatever the hell he's called, it's a Dweevil, you know, it's okay. You're definitely able to not like take damage from it once you get the fire upgrade. And then also fire can be whistled away just like poison. So I think that even though it's above the Munged Dweevil, not by much, because you can also just be immune to it. And in Pikmin 2, you know, you have a lot of time to call back your Pikmin, unlike Pikmin 1. Is that the Man at Legs? Oh my god. Get on up there, Man at Legs. Get on up there. I think I'm going to need to start putting down some of the danger ones. Man at Legs, I feel like it's up there with the Groink. It's definitely harder than the Bullbear, I think, because, yeah, it's ridiculous. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to move down the red one. Am I going to move down the pileated? I think I am going to move down pileated, because with the sheer amount of pileateds we had to deal with, it's just tedious. It's not like it's insanely difficult. Like the water wraith can kill like 80 of your Pikmin at once. The man-at legs can just evaporate your numbers. The pileated snagret can't do that. Yeah, no, man-at legs broken. Absolutely absurd. If it gets your captain, he can just constantly just hit you with bullets and you can't do anything about it. And then your Pikmin are with you and then you're getting hit. And obviously if there's like places to hide and take cover, that's one thing. But in a vacuum, honestly, the man-at-legs is more dangerous than the freaking... Oh my god, is the man-at-legs like the most dangerous enemy? We're going to have to organize this top part because there's a lot of big danger going on here. Okay. Spectralids. Good. I'm glad we're thinking about something that's easier. Yeah. Down here. Let's just find the other Spectralid. Yeah, and there's a yellow one too. Yep. All 3 Spectralids are just going to be an easy. That shouldn't come as any surprise. They straight up cannot damage your Pikmin. Wattlepuss. Yeah, this thing, I don't think this thing kills your Pikmin. I think it just blows bubbles, right? I don't think this thing has the ability to kill Pikmin. And for that, it's annoying. It can't, yeah. It might be able to put them in like a dangerous spot, but probably not. I will put it just in the easy. I don't even feel right putting it in meh because it just blows bubbles. Dwarf Orange Bulborb, I would say because of their increased like radius, probably more dangerous than the regulars, but still, you can still one-shot them. They don't have the calling ability, nothing like that. So I can just put them barely above the regular Bulborbs despite having literally the same AI. So I feel like that's totally fine. The Armored Cannon Beetle, the one from Pikmin 1. This thing, actually, like, it's not difficult. It's not. But if you don't know how to deal with it, it is. And that's the same, like, principle with the Raging, with the Ghoulix, even with, like, the Greater Spotted Jellyfloat. I think it goes with these 3. I think it just goes in okay, because it has the capability of being very dangerous, but it's along the lines of, like, if you know what you're doing, it'll be fine, right? Like, you just throw the Pikmin in its little blowhole, and then it opens up its little molten butt, and you just kind of hammer away at it. It's like it's weird. It's like a molten brain butt. Like, look at that for like a split second. Tell me that's not a molten brain butt. The whistleblower, that guy. The fake treasure guy. Antenna beetle is what it's called. I knew that. Can't damage your Pikmin. It can have them come under control, and I have seen it lead a squad of Pikmin that I had into electricity. So it can inadvertently kill your Pikmin in the same vein as the Matites. So just for that, I'm gonna put it in meh, but just on its own, it can't really do anything. And then also, like when it jumps away, it can kind of fling your Pikmin places, but not very far. Segmented Crobster. In its own arena, it's not that bad, but even in its own arena, it's still kind of bad. Like, this thing literally needs to be nerfed by the arena, because placing this thing anywhere is just unfathomable. You can't burp it while it's rolling. It's got crazy regeneration, a crazy health bar. Its little, like, arm sweep attack gets your Pikmin just all types of flustered. It can damage your captain pretty easy. It spawns rocks that fall on your Pikmin. And then it also, the way that the model is, it like doesn't smash on things you think it should smash on. And you won't see that in the main game. You'll only see that in like a ROM hack where this thing is found just like outside of that box arena, but it's ridiculous. I would definitely, from the amount I suffered because of the Crobster in the Pikmin 2 Kaizo series, I have reason to put this thing like fairly high up. I'm gonna leave it above the Water Wraith for now, because I do think it's more dangerous than the Water Wraith. I think its AI is actually like pretty good, which is really surprising. I think the Water Wraith is like kind of dumb because he doesn't like stop and turn. Like he has to actually just keep going. The Crobster is a little much. Oh, the Doodlebug. All right, Doodlebug, controversial. The doodlebug is for sure controversial. I'm putting it in the bottom end of avoid. Now, why is that? Because it can be a rest floor. This thing spawns out of nowhere. It poots. If it spawns in the wrong spot, 80 of your Pikmin are poisoned. And when Pikmin are poisoned, they just flop everywhere. And that, honestly, opens up more possibility for death than almost everything below it. Like, especially in the Frontier Cavern, like I'm specifically thinking the first floor, it poots, and then there's like a bunch of leaves everywhere, and there's also a bunch of snow bulborbs. So your Pikmin just kind of go everywhere. It's never a good time, because if you don't like get your Pikmin in time, then one, they die. But then two, you're also focused on getting the bitter spray from the doodlebug itself. So you're kind of torn between like going after your Pikmin or getting the bitter spray. You kind of want to do both. And that kind of puts you on like a time crunch for both. So the whole situation is just kind of messed up because of the doodlebug's farts. So for that reason, I am putting it at the very bottom of avoid. Snitchbug. I mean, it can throw Pikmin like over the edge. That's pretty much it. I've seen it happen in like Pikmin 2. It can't really do anything besides that. It can grab the captains in Pikmin 3 though, but let's see, where does the non-damaging enemies come into play? I think it's even less of a deal than the blowhog, because the blowhog can get multiple Pikmin unflowered. This thing can only get max 2. So sure, it's annoying. Sure, it has a really long like radius and can kind of get you from anywhere, but I think the swooping snitchbug just is not a big deal, even a little bit. Okay, this is the adult's orange bulborb. This thing, I would even say, is equally as dangerous as the fiery bullblax, only because sometimes you can stun it with purples. But when it's sleeping, it is able to recognize that you are closer to it from a greater distance. And you guys know what I'm talking about. Like it is able to sense you with a larger radius than a regular bulborb. So you might not even get the chance to throw your Pikmin at it. Like you kind of have to really enter the zone and start throwing really quickly. And even if you do that, it can still get up. It can still be super dangerous. And in fact, I think I honestly, like the orange bulborbs definitely can give you trouble. And the worst part is that they're not uncommon. And especially if you are just like underground and going through like tunnels, they can sense you from like the other side of tunnels, and then they're just awake for whatever reason. So definitely an issue, definitely have more health, and then definitely can just eat through your Pikmin numbers if you're not careful. Gray Wallywogs. All right, now we're talking. Now we are talking. These things, Pikmin 1, Pikmin 2. Both. For whatever goddamn reason, when they land, like if this is the size of the belly of the gray Wallywog, this is the size of the area that it hits. For whatever reason, it seems like this thing crushes more Pikmin than it should. And then on top of that, it jumps farther than the yellow Wallywog. And especially in like Pikmin 2, the way it interacts with like walls and like kind of bounces off of things and rides certain walls to like go around it, they can be a little unpredictable. Definitely in the avoid tier. I'm trying to think, like they have the same dread. Like I feel the same dread looking at an orange bulborb compared to a Wallywog. In fact, I'm going to put them right above the Aristocrab. I don't want to say danger, because they're like kind of a common enemy. But yeah, no, they definitely can wipe out your Pikmin. Like they can squash a ton of Pikmin at once. They can squash like 30 to 40 of them. And it doesn't even make sense, because like how could that many Pikmin fit underneath that Wallywog? Mamutas are easy peasy. They can damage the captains. I will say that. They can efficiently damage the captains. But honestly, I'm going to put them underneath the Snitchbug and at the bottom of Meh. They don't endanger your Pikmin at all. In fact, they flower them. They flower them? Okay, hold on. Well, if they flower them, then... Yeah, he's earned a spot. I'm gonna say he is above the snitch bug, just because he's more likely to damage your captain than like the snitch bug is. So, but yeah, no, he flowers your Pikmin. He doesn't have a ton of health in Pikmin 2. In Pikmin 1, he's just like the only enemy there. And even if he's like with a bunch of other things, you know, like other enemies, he buries them. And that makes it so that other enemies can't get them. And yeah, it kind of endangers your Pikmin in a way, because if he buries like half of them, you only have half a squad to work with, because you can't really pluck the Pikmin without the pluckaphone. But besides that, like, come on, it's the Mamuda, guys. He's just trying to plant stuff. This is a weird half of a Mirror Slug. Now, the Mirror Slug, I can't say it's meh, because it does have the capability of killing a lot of Pikmin. But honestly, like the boulders it spits, I'm surprised that they don't like kill more Pikmin than they should. I'm pretty sure they just bury Pikmin. Just for that, like this thing goes down like a couple tiers. Like if those boulders killed your Pikmin, then we'd be having insane times with the Mirror Slug, but they don't. I don't know. I think he's just not bad. He can, okay, maybe he's, all right, yeah, we'll put him at close to the top of okay. He's definitely not an avoid enemy, like, you just have to kind of get past him. One, you have to get past him for the story. But also, like, you could just swarm his mouth, and then you're good. Like, you just sometimes don't lose Pikmin to him, because you're less likely to lose Pikmin to him than almost any other boss in Pikmin 3, besides, like, maybe 1. Which we haven't even gotten to yet. But yeah, I think the top of okay is totally fine for him. Using bomb rocks, using just the ability to attack his mouth with a bunch of Pikmin is usually not a big deal. So, Mirror Slug, just okay. This thing's gonna go right next to the Puffy Blowhog, except underneath it. Why underneath it? Because, well, it's got less health. That's all. The Bumblers. Bumbling snitch bugs can, because when they snag your captain, your Pikmin just kind of do whatever. And you hate for your Pikmin to do whatever. And in fact, I think they're up here with the antenna beetle because they make your Pikmin do things you don't want them to do. And that's a big reason why the Matites, the antenna beetle, and the bumbling snitch bug are all together, is because you lose control over your Pikmin if these enemies like actually do their intended thing, you know? Probably higher than both of them, actually. So, because it damages your captains if you're not careful, too. But yeah, no, definitely just kind of a minor annoyance. It's really only when there's like multiple of them that it starts to get dangerous, but on its own, like it's not that bad. Hermit Crawmad. They're not bad. They're also just kind of a meh enemy because they get one Pikmin at a time. I like their design a lot, but as long as you're careful, like you just need to avoid them, and it's totally okay. If you know how to deal with it, it's so easy, and it only kills one Pikmin at a time. Beady. Now, I'm gonna also include Baldy as, like Baldy Longlegs from Pikmin 3 as Beady, because they're essentially the same enemy. Beady in Pikmin 2 is the easiest of the three. Beady in Pikmin 1, sort of easy, but feels like it has bigger feet. And then Baldy in Pikmin 3, same kind of deal. Is it tougher than the Raging? I'm just thinking about Pikmin 1, but I think Pikmin 2 and Pikmin 3 like drag it down really hard to like the form of almost a mini boss in the same sense of the Snagrit. I think that it actually is just below the Raging, because the Raging has a ton of health too. And even though this thing can kill multiple Pikmin, it's only if you're like not careful. But it is definitely more likely for the Beady to kill your Pikmin, like a decent chunk of them, than it is for the Raging. Because the Raging, if you're going in with like 100 Pikmin, like you're asking for trouble, right? Although I will say it's more dangerous than the Mirror Slug. Yeah, I think that's a fine spot for it. I don't want to disrespect Beady Longlegs, but overall, this thing's just right down with the female, because I don't even know what it's called. It's like the wandering one. It like latches onto fruit and it runs away and distracts your Pikmin, and it doesn't kill them. It's more of an annoyance than anything. It just wanders around. So, and honestly, I think it's less dangerous than the female, because the female's at least mixed up with the males. These things just travel in a pack and do nothing. So I gotta say they're not a big deal at all. Ooh, a creeping chrysanthemum. They're okay. I think that usually you know when they're coming. Sometimes you won't be able to stun them as fast as you want to, or you know, you try to activate their shake off animation but then they just kind of don't, and then they eat the Pikmin on their chest anyway. So because of that, I think I will probably put them at least probably behind the Snagret. I don't think they're more dangerous than the Snagret. Even though the Snagret just isn't that dangerous. The Snagret's really carried by Pikmin 1. Same thing with Beatty, honestly. But they do have the capability of killing a decent amount of Pikmin. That's kind of like what this top spot of OK is like having the ability to kill a bunch of Pikmin, but like very situationally, and also they really just don't kill a lot of Pikmin, period. All right, Pyroclasmic Slooch, I've never had never had an issue with. I will say, just because it's a fire enemy, I think it probably gets over the Hermit Crawmad, but the HP that that thing has is just like hardly any, dude. They hardly have any HP. You could literally throw 3 red Pikmin at them, and they're gonna die before they even have a chance to either shake off your Pikmin or like lick them. So I think the Pyroclasmic Sloosh is like one of the most disappointing enemies because it looks really cool and then just kind of doesn't do anything at all. Oh my god, is that the Titan Dweevil? Oh, Jesus Christmas. That's the Titan Dweevil. Okay, well, yeah, the Titan Dweevil has to be up here. He's got to be in the danger. It's a good sign that 2 out of the 3 final bosses are in the danger tier though, right? And we're considering this with him having all the weapons as well. If you're just using yellow Pikmin, you can avoid the electricity attack, but you can still get hit by like the fire, you can still get hit by the poison. The Hydro Cannon can absolutely just like wreck some of your Pikmin. I think that the Titan Dweevil, I don't know, we'll definitely organize the danger tier after we're like completely done, because I think that a lot of the stuff up here has a case to be made for like the most dangerous enemy in the entire game, except for maybe the Bullbear and the hairy Longlegs, and probably the Meerklops too. But everything else, there's a bunch of stuff from Pikmin 2 that's just like, oh my god. Okay, the Arachnorb. Usually never an issue, but sometimes you just don't know they're there. And if you don't know they're there, they catch the wing Pikmin on their routes. It's the dumbest thing ever. Like, you'd think they would just go around it, but they don't. I don't understand how it's even possible for the wing Pikmin to just not notice that there's a spider web right there. But sometimes it happens. Sometimes they get your Pikmin, and then sometimes you want to throw like rock Pikmin at them to kill them, and the rock Pikmin gets stuck in the web, and then they get eaten. So I gotta say that the Arachnorb, or the, is it Arachnorb? Arachnode? Whatever it is. Probably more dangerous. Yeah, I think it's Creeping Chrysanthemum tier, because it's like kind of unexpected sometimes, and then that unexpectedness can lead to deaths. So I think it's kind of the same wave. I think I've just played less Pikmin 3 than Pikmin 2, so I'm better at dealing with the Chrysanthemum than I am the Arachnode. It is Node. It's Arachnode, definitely. Ooh, Cloaking Burrownit. Well, again, it can only kill 1 Pikmin at a time, and as long as you swarm its face, it's never going to kill a Pikmin. So I gotta say, it is, yeah, it's down here. It is not dangerous. Yeah, I would even say it's easier to deal with than the one that's facing front. In combination with other enemies, it's definitely, it can be annoying, but again, I can only get like a Pikmin at a time. So yellow Wollywog, definitely less dangerous than regular Wollywog. I have to put them in the OK tier though. And the reason I have to put them in OK is because they do have the capability of squishing a decent amount of your Pikmin. With good management, it really should never happen, but it still definitely can. And do I think they're more dangerous than Snagrets? Not really. They're kind of very telegraphed. So I can't say that they're more dangerous than the Snagret, because the Snagret's got some tricks up its sleeve. Do I think it's less dangerous than the Chrysanthemum? Yeah, we can put the Wollywog somewhere there. I think that gives it respect, but honestly, it's not nearly as dangerous as the gray one. The gray one goes further, sees further, and it is just like bigger for whatever reason. It's not bigger, but its hitbox is. So, all right, Dirigibug. I think this thing does not have the ability to directly kill your Pikmin, right? It has to spawn the bomb rocks to be able to do so. So I think the Dirigibug, like, it's in the same vein of the volatile Dweevil, except you can kind of move the bomb rocks like out of the way, you know, like, or just run your Pikmin back. And then the bomb rocks, honestly, they can kind of be used to your advantage too. I think that they're in the okay tier. I think that capability to be dangerous, I think goes right up with the Wollywog though. Because you can absolutely kind of get caught with your pants down, and a couple dirigibugs can throw some bomb rocks in some really suspect spots, and all of a sudden you need to like get out, you know. But for the most part, like, they usually, when you explode their balloons, they chuck the bomb rocks far enough away where you don't need to worry about them. So I can't give them, I think they're less dangerous than the Wollywogs then, honestly. It's like, yeah, if you know how to deal with them, they're just not a big deal. I think bomb rocks are just obviously super volatile. Bullmen are an interesting case because you kill one and you get 10 more Pikmin. Like, they give you Pikmin, right? And as long as they don't eat more than 10 of your Pikmin, you're ending up with a net positive. That doesn't decide how dangerous they are because they're able to more easily eat Pikmin than, I think, even like the grown-up red Bullbear, right? So I think that the Bullman, low-key, like, I think the Bullman is at like the top of meh. Because it can eat a couple Pikmin, but even if it doesn't have enough health to like survive for longer, and then you just get more Bullman back. So I gotta say, like, yeah, it can eat a couple of them, but yeah, no, I can't. I can't even put it in okay because it literally gives you more like assets. So, okay, the crystallized something, the guy with the rock guy, yeah, calcified crush blat. See how it takes me a second? It doesn't take me a second with Pokemon. It takes me a second with Pikmin enemies. Crush blat, usually you're just fighting with rock Pikmin. Usually it's not a big deal at all. But that takes a really freaking long time. I've hardly ever lost Pikmin with the Crush Blat, I'll be honest. I think this thing, again, it has the capability of killing a lot of Pikmin, but just doesn't, because usually the scenarios you fight them in, it's not even like as dangerous as like a Wollywog or anything like that. Yeah, as long as you have rock Pikmin, like, you're gonna be fine. I think again, it's the same thing with like you have to learn kind of how to deal with it, but overall, like, as long as you just use rock Pikmin, like, you're gonna be just fine. And in fact, that makes me even put it down even lower, I think, because it's just like not incredibly dangerous. And you know what? It's in the, if you know how to deal with it, you're not gonna have an issue. And that, it's just like a specific type of Pikmin. Blue Dweevil, caustic Dweevil, pretty much the same thing as the fiery Dweevil, but worse because it does have the ability to stun your captain at all times despite any suit upgrades. So it is one of the most dangerous Dweevils. But, you know, while we're at it, the most dangerous Dweevil, the single most dangerous Dweevil, is obviously the electric one. Electricity is dummy overpowered in Pikmin 2. And honestly, I wish it kind of stayed that way for Pikmin 3, but, you know, whatever. Yeah, no, if your Pikmin are just kind of like whacking at it randomly, and it just gives them a shock, like, they're dead unless they're yellow. Like, they're just straight up dead. You know, you do have to be very careful with the Anode Dweevils, for sure. Again, have the capacity of killing a lot of Pikmin, but as long as you attack them with the right kind, or just kind of mob them with purples, you should be totally okay. I will say, though, I'm going to put them in Avoid, because you don't want to have to deal with them unless you have to. Yeah, they're almost just as dangerous as the Volatile. Volatile has a bigger range and follows you, but the Anode one, like, if it has a treasure, like, you're like, oh my god, like, I don't want to fight that thing. You have to deal with the electricity. Like, you have to be careful, you know? So I think that actually warrants a spot way higher than the other Dweevils, which is crazy, because that just proves how much more dangerous electricity is than any of the other elements in Pikmin 2. The Smoky Prog, okay, there's ways to cheese this enemy. There is. But the ability to kill is just unprecedented in any Pikmin game. It's almost so easy. It's like the easiest to lose Pikmin to the Man at Legs and the Smoky Prog. The Smoky Prog's poison, sometimes it just doesn't make any sense. Like, it just does. It kills your Pikmin. If you miss him, they might just evaporate into ghosts. And, like, what are you going to do about it, right? And on top of that, it goes right to the onion. It's always in your face. It's always probably following you. There are ways to cheese it with, like, waiting for it to roar and then trapping it under the onion and killing it that way. But It would be disrespectful not to put it in danger because it absolutely has killed thousands and thousands and thousands of Pikmin across multiple different playthroughs. Not of mine, but just of the world, right? Like if you look at these enemies and the amount of deaths that they're responsible for, the Smoky Prog has to have one of the highest kill counts, just period, of any Pikmin enemy. So that alone, I think, puts them up in danger. Wogpole, obviously, not doing anything. It's distracting and you could beat it up. So these two go together, right? A node beetle. This is another electricity enemy. I think that they're not that big of a deal because you do just need to kind of like clear the room with them. And then you also need 2 of them for it to be any type of dangerous. So I'm actually going to stick it. Am I going to put it in meh or am I going to put it in okay? I've never been personally scared of a node beetles, really. I think that electricity is dangerous enough that I am going to just stick it kind of... I'm gonna stick it with the water dumple. Cause like, who knows, you know, your Pikmin might just be doing something and, you know, the freaking antenna beetle might just lead them into like a path of electricity, like that happens, but the node beetle usually isn't a deal. You just do have to be very mindful of it. These things, these things I've never seen kill a Pikmin before. I've never seen it. And you just hit them once with a rock Pikmin and that's it. And then they're dead. These leaf things are substantially more dangerous than the grubs. They're more dangerous than the snagret, I think. I think they're very, like, it's the camouflage, man. It's impossible to see them coming. So, honestly, I think that these things are kind of in the avoid tier. Like, because they're easy, but they move around fast, they get Pikmin fast, and sometimes you just don't know they're there. I think that puts them probably over the Doodlebug, but not very much further. I think that I'm more likely to get a couple of my Pikmin eaten by this thing than I am to have them die on like Beatty or a Snagret or something like that. So I think that puts them in the avoid tier. Yeah, we'll rank the bearded Amprat. I think that this thing actually is also just okay. You know, it's like if you know how to deal with it, it's not a big deal. Yellow Pikmin are kind of able to easily mob it, but even if you have rocks and you just wait for it to run out of its electricity, like you can't even eat your Pikmin when it's not like electrified. So I think it is definitely more dangerous than the Node Beetle. Probably more dangerous than the Water Dumple, but I'm still only gonna stick it with the Anode Beetle because it needs to charge, and on top of that, you need to attack it with Pikmin that aren't yellow. And that's like a bunch of requirements for it to be dangerous. So I cannot give the bearded Amprat really any respect besides that. And then, ladies and gentlemen, last but not least, it is the OG Bullbear, the Goomba of Pikmin. It's the Snow Bullbear. I'll put it above the Snow Bullbear because it does exist in Pikmin 1, and it's more difficult in Pikmin 1 if you don't get the Bum Rush, but it's just right in the center. It's just right in the okay spot, you know? It can be deadly. They're obviously super duper common, so sometimes you can just get, you know, mobbed by them. For newer players, they might be a little scary. If there's multiple of them, it might be kind of rough because they can get woken up, but at the same time, you know, they are just a regular Bullbear. They sleep. You can just kind of attack them with their back turned. You can sneak up on them. And then they don't have as much health as, like, you know, the orange Bullbear, or they don't wander their area like the spotty Bullbear or nothing like that. So let's see. We have this whole top danger spot, right? These two kind of go together. Specifically, I'd like to kind of make it so that there's a definitive ending point of each tier, right? Is the Smoky Prog more deadly than the Plasm Wraith? No, I don't think so. Is it more deadly than the Crobster? The Crobster in his arena, the Prog is more deadly than the Crobster. The Crobster in a vacuum, I think is just like, I think the Crobster is just insane in a vacuum. I think that's fine. I think this is my list. I think the most dangerous enemy in the game is probably the Man at Legs. This is indeed my list. Let me know what you guys think in the comments when this eventually becomes a YouTube video. If you enjoy this kind of content, obviously, feel free to subscribe. It's totally free, you know, if you want to. Join our Discord. follow me on Twitter. It'll appear, you know, at the very end of the video when it does the whole outro thing. And yeah, no, this was an absolute ton of fun. So, thank you all for watching. And of course, till next time.